Hi, I'm back. And today, I'm going to keep things simple. Yesterday we looked at anchor points. Today we're going to look at anchor points. We're going to take, first we're going to look at the animations just to do a little recap on what we did yesterday, at the techniques that we learned. And then we're going to take those techniques and we're going to build two animations that more or less share the same properties and are very simple to create, but have more complex visual aesthetics. Okay, so let's get to it. This is the state of our animations that we made yesterday. So first we looked at anchor points and we learned what they were about, and that the default is for a layer to rotate by its center because its anchor point is positioned in the center of the layer itself. Then we looked at the top left anchor point. We moved it up to the top left and we saw that rotating it will now rotate around the top left of that layer. And the similar thing here was if we put it on the bottom right, it would do the same thing, rotate around the bottom right. And then we created this animation where it appears that a shape is transforming into a star, but really we're using the middle anchor point, that's just the default value, and we're overlaying a bunch of exactly similar shapes to give the effect of this transformation from one thing to another, but it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. And then we ended off by showing you that you can actually animate the anchor point. Okay, let me just slow this one down a little bit so that we can see it a little bit better. And what you can see is this at the beginning, the anchor point is in the bottom right, and at the end it's in the top left. And what happens, and you can start to see it as it plays through slowly, right here, around this moment, okay, it's really clear that it's rotating around the bottom right-hand corner, but not exactly, because even as it starts to rotate, that anchor point is starting to move. So as it's starting to move, the center of rotation changes. And when we get to the end, it's pretty obvious that right about this time, it's actually very close to rotating by that top left corner. And then you get to the end. So you can animate the anchor point. And we're going to combine a couple of these ideas together to create, first off, this animation right here. This is the end state. It rotates. It starts out as a square and then turns into this. It's very simple, even though it looks complex geometrically. Let's get to it. Okay, so we create a new timeline by clicking the plus button right here. And we're going to add a rectangle. We're going to turn on relative mode. We are going to click the lock icon right in the middle here, and we're going to make it 60 by 60. Okay, so that scaled it for us. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the fill color well. We're going to make the color 0%. And if you want to know why we need to make it 0%, other than me just saying it's because we're animating, there's an episode, I think it's FC6, where we discuss that. All right, so we have our basic shape, and now we want to start animating it. What we actually want to do in this animation is we want to animate it by the left-hand corner. We want to animate it from 60 to 180. That's the first step that we want to do. So we're going to make that 180. Now, if you noticed, I unclicked that lock right before I did that, so I could change the width without changing the height. The next thing that we want to do is we want to change the anchor point to the left-hand side. And from yesterday's episode, we also learned that that creates an X animation. But today we don't want that X animation. We're going to get rid of the second thing, the second key value there. So I selected the end one and I changed it. Or I deleted it, sorry. So now this is what our animation is going to look like. And we want it to end at 200, 200, like this. Let's have a look at what that... Oh, that was at the beginning of the animation. We want it to end at 200, 200. Like that. So it should... You know what? I did this whole animation backwards. I'm just going to start again. All right. I'm going to delete this state right here. Okay, so 60 by 60, and I'm just going to press Command to snap that to the center. That's the state that we want. Generated a couple key values. Okay, so, oops. Let's just start from here. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the end of the timeline this time instead of animating at the beginning. And now I'm going to make my changes. I'm going to make it 180. And I'm going to change the anchor point. And you notice it did create that x-axis, or that x animation right here. We don't want that. We want the animation, we want the position to stay the same. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us this animated effect here. Let's just speed that up a tiny little bit. Okay, so it's going to grow it and change that position at the same time, or the anchor point X. And that's why you get this kind of like pausey little bump thing on the left-hand side. It's because the anchor point is moving in relation to the width. So the width is changing, which is changing the anchor point, and then we're animating the anchor point at the same time. And so that's why you get this little effect. Next thing we want to do at the end of our animation, we want to rotate this to 45 degrees. So I just selected the layer, clicked into the rotation text view, property text field, and then hit enter. So now we have this animation, and that's it. That's the basis for that whole complex animation that we just looked at. Okay, I'm going to call this R1. And let's just go back and have a look one more time. That's the whole basis for this thing. Okay. So how do you get from what we have to this? Well, you duplicate with key values in place, and then you select everything, and you duplicate with key values in place again, and you do it one more time. Duplicate with key values in place. And then for each one of these new shapes, we change the end rotation by 45 degrees. So I select the second one, and we call that 90. Third, 135. Fourth one, 180. Fifth, 225. Sixth, 270. And you can start to see that shape coming in. And we go 315 and 360. And we have our animation, just like that. Easy, right? Okay, so you can really start to get to complex geometric things. You can start to get these complex motions that would otherwise be really hard to either envision, create, or recreate by just making some very simple animations using the anchor point in combination with width or position movements, and then duplicating them like that. All right, so we're going to do another one, and it's going to be very similar in terms of the process, but instead of using one layer, we're going to embed a layer inside of a group, and we're going to animate the layer inside the group, and we're going to animate the group. Let's try that. The outcome of the next animation is actually going to look like this one. Nope, it's going to look like this one. It's going to look like that. We're very similar to this one. Okay, so let's have a look at it in Flow. We're going to create a new timeline, clicking on that plus, and we're going to start with a 40 by 40. We're going to start with a 40 by 40 shape. Rectangle. Relative mode on. I'm going to drag the stroke color into the color well for a fill color. Then I'm going to click the stroke color and make it 0%. Okay, so now we don't see any stroke. Fill colors there. I'm going to make this 40 by 40. So lock the width and height, change that to 40. And now, actually, let's make it 60. Yeah, I don't know. Let's make it 40. Yeah, 40. R1. Now the next step is we're going to create an empty layer. We're going to go and we're going to insert a layer. We're going to make it 150 by 10. I'm going to give it a background color by clicking on its background color. We're going to make that thing dark so that we can see it. All right. Now, one thing before we get going, I'm going to click and select the scene. I'm going to unclick the adjust content on resize. And then I'm going to resize the scene just because the numbers are easier to divide by 2 and stuff like that. So I'm going to make it 400 by 400. And now I'm going to turn off relative mode. Oh no, we're going to leave relative mode on. We're just going to position things. So I'm just going to move this one here. I'm going to press Command and snap it to the center. And the same thing here. I'm going to Command snap it to the center, but I want the edge, the outside edge of that that layer to be at the very center of the scene. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab R1, just drag it up here like this, and drop it onto that layer. What that does is it puts it inside of that layer, i.e. it puts it into a group, or it creates a group from that layer with one sublayer inside of it now. Okay, I'm going to call that G1. And now we're going to animate. So let's turn on the animations by turning off relative mode. I'm going to go to the end of the animation. I'm going to select R1 and I'm going to just shift command drag it right to the edge of that layer. And I'm going to rotate it by 135 degrees. Done. Now let's have a look at this timeline that we just created down here. Okay. So there's an X animation and a rotation animation. So it should move and rotate it like that. That's it. That's all we're going to do to this shape. The next steps that we're going to do are identical to the last couple of steps that we did in the last animation. We're first going to select the group, and then over here at the end, we're going to rotate that to 45 degrees. Oh, we're going to undo that. Sorry. We're going to turn on relative mode. We're going to change its anchor point to the left middle. And now we're going to do the 45 degree rotation. Okay, so now our animation looks like that. Okay. Next, duplicate. Duplicate, key values in place. Select those two, duplicate, key values in place. Select all of those, duplicate with key values in place, and press play. They're all overlapping, but exact same animations. Click to the end. Right here, we click that little icon, goes to the end of our timeline. And now we select each next layer, and we change its rotation. Same thing that we did in the last one. Instead of just doing it on one, we're doing it on a group with an embedded layer inside of it. There we go, 180. 225. 270. 315. And 360. Now we hit play. And this is the animation we get. I'm going to pause. We're just going to select them all. Relative mode on. So I'm going to track this change. We don't want to track this change. Background color. Get rid of it. And now we have our animation, just like that. If we speed it up to its normal speed, we get the same thing that we saw, or very similar to the same thing that we saw in Safari. Just like that. Okay, so what did we do? Create a simple animation, duplicate it a bunch of times, modify only one parameter, right? Copy the animation. Okay, first, the animation is a combination of anchor point animations, widths, and rotations. But it's a very simple 1 second animation. Then we copy and duplicate that, and we only change one property for each of the copies, and we get this more complicated aesthetic that pops out of that. All right. So today's challenge that we're throwing down is this one right here. I'm going to go File, Open Recent, Leap. This is the animation that I'm going to challenge you to create today. I'm going to press play. Bum, bum, bum. So what is happening here? There is an anchor point animation. Sorry, there's no anchor point animation. We modify the anchor point. And here's the hint that I'm going to give you. If you create an anchor point animation, you can select one of the key values and change its value manually. So here the anchor point X position is at 2. All right. That's the hint that I'm going to give you. So we're going to rotate around that anchor point. And then we're going to use the other techniques that we've learned so far of step curves and step curves, rotations, to snap things into place so that we get this step. Because if you notice up here, there's only one shape. It's a rectangle with rounded corners. Okay. And it goes like this. 1, 2, 3. And that's it. All right. So challenge given, gauntlet thrown down, or whatever they used to do with metal gloves, that kind of thing. And I'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.